Hey, Helen here, your host. Great to have you along for the second season of The Beautiful Side of Grief, where we continue to hear from people from all walks of life who have faced or have been involved with heart-wrenching loss and who've come out the other side with so many positives to share with others. I know this may seem like an impossibility for you right here, right now, to be in that space. And believe me, I understand. I lost my own gorgeous 18-year-old daughter and only child in a car accident. Yet, here I am 4 years later, sharing my own journey and those of others in the most heartwarming and joyful way. Each and every one of my guests share their own beautiful insights and their strategies for getting through their grief. And through these stories, I hope you'll find your own way to deal with your grief in whatever form that may take. I'll pop my guest links and any free resources in the episode notes, along with my website address if you'd like to know more about the energy work I do, as that was my lifesaver in my own grief journey. Don't forget to subscribe and like so you can keep informed of each weekly episode. So now let's see who our guest is this week. How does a former sedentary overweight smoker go to biking nearly 5,000 miles in just 6 weeks to meet with participants for a book that explores the emotional side of cancer? Well, this is what our guest today, David Richman, did in 2016. For this incredibly successful entrepreneur, author, public speaker, athlete, and philanthropist, it started as a transition away from what others wanted of him to focusing on what he really wanted out of life, the seeds of which were planted in a commitment he made to his sister June back in 2007, when she was in the final stages of her life battling brain cancer. In the years since, David has clocked up some incredible miles through various endurance events to raise awareness and funds for the care, research, and support of those affected by cancer and their friends and family. We're going to explore all of this and more, and his latest book, Cycle of Lives, which chronicles the lives of 15 people who were affected by cancer, either as patients, doctors, researchers, caregivers, or otherwise. The links to which will be in the episode notes, along with David's other contact information. Thank you for tuning in today to listen, and may your own journey, whatever that may be filled with love, hope, and happiness. Welcome, David. So good to have you speaking with me today.
Oh, thank you, Helen. I'm glad to be here. And that's a very wonderful intro. I'm tearing up a little bit. It's very sweet.
Oh, no, well, you did it all. I just took the information. So
yeah, right. When you hear it from somebody else, I'm like, whoa, holy cow. That's so nice.
Yeah, wow. I'm excited because this is an incredible journey that you've been living for the past 15 years. And can you take us through, David, what it was that impacted your life enough that you basically flipped your former lifestyle on its head?
Well, oftentimes that kind of transformation, right, that flipping things on your head will come out of some kind of trauma, right, where you realize that, holy cow, the road my life was going on is not the road that it's on anymore. And, sometimes that's a backbreaker and sometimes it's a pivot point, right? And I understand both. Some things are just too hard to move on from, or some things people don't recover from. But the kind of traumas that I had gave me an opportunity to transform and go down a different path in my life. So basically, I was dealing with all kinds of stresses, both self-imposed and otherwise. I was married to an abusive alcoholic. I had 2 young twins, 4 years old, that I needed to protect from her, and I needed to protect myself. I was doing all kinds of stress at work. I'm in the financial services business, which is a really stressful area. I mean, there are a lot, but a lot of stresses at work. And I was overweight. I was a smoker. I just was not living a great life. And I started to come up with this idea that I had lived my life, Helen, really trying to make other people happy or to impress them or to prove that I belonged where I was belonging. And I was always looking outward for approval and outward for the responses. And that just was the wrong path to go down. And oddly enough, and sadly enough, at that time, when kind of all of this was just really getting to a boiling point, that's when my sister called me up and said, "Hey, I just want to let you know I've been diagnosed with terminal brain cancer. And I just said, oh my gosh, like this is it, right? I got to make a change. And so that was the start of it. It was a culmination of a bunch of different things. And I probably just, all of it just raised this awareness in me that I got to change the path of my life. And so that was kind of the start.
Yeah. And that's the key word that you use there, awareness. Because up until that point, probably like so many others and myself included in that, we just go through life blindly, following this path that's been set out for us. And then it just takes something like some major trauma or a culmination of things that just end up boiling over for us to actually stop and take a good look at our lives and how we're living it. So that certainly was the case for me. So it was your beautiful sister, June, that was struggling, wasn't it? And can you share a little bit about what that was like for you, going on that journey with her and why you decided to honor her in the way you did?
Yeah, I'm really happy to. So, and it's taken a lot of reflection and a lot of talking about it to figure it out. I wasn't so aware of what was going on during, but I kind of figured it out by doing some, little forensic accounting of my own emotions and my own experiences. But for sure, part of it came from the fact that June and I had, a very odd childhood. We had parents that were almost 40 years age difference. So I had a mom who was way too young to really want kids. She certainly didn't really appear to like them. I had a dad who was 40 years older than my mom, and he was kind of too old to have kids and don't think he really wanted them. And so her and I kind of had this, we looked out for each other childhood through really a lot of nonsense and some bad times. And when we both went along our path in life, I was super satisfied. It was just a fulfilling feeling to me to see her come out of that childhood. And she had a beautiful marriage. She had 2 wonderful kids. She had good friends, a great career. She was really, really happy and settled and living this wonderful life. Now, I'm doing okay, but I'm way more stressed out. I don't have my stuff together like she does. And so I really admired that. I felt good about it. And it really was touching me in a not so easy way that she was going to have that all go away. Right. And she was going to lose her husband and her kids and all of her friends, and all the great life that she had made for herself was going to be taken away. And it was a couple of years later. And I think that's probably one of the driving factors that kept me kind of focused on trying to do something to give back, was that I just felt this like super emotional, like not turmoil as much, but it was just like this magnet that just said, you know what, you got to do something to honor the journey that she had taken that put her in such a great spot. Because then when you're in such a great spot and it gets taken away from you, it just seems that it's all the more like meaningful and impactful and maybe traumatic. But so that was kind of the deal. And at the same time, I had just started to pivot my life at that time, right? Started to say, hey, let's focus on making David happy so you can be a better father. Let's focus on making David happy so you can be a better boss. Let's stop smoking. Let's start getting healthy. Let's start doing some exercise. So I had just started pivoting into my better life. And so I kind of married those two things together, and I started doing endurance events in her memory so that I could raise money for the cancer center that took care of her. And, like a number of other things too. But that was kind of the seeds for this book, which was, my latest book, which was when I was doing these endurance events, Helen, and really interacting with people on a really personal level, right? Because it gets pretty raw at those times, as you well know. I noticed that people, especially when it came to cancer, more so than a lot of other things, were unable to talk about the emotional side of it.
Yeah.
Right. And you know this. You've been through some very, very trying and tragic times that people abandon you because they don't want to make you feel uncomfortable. They don't want to bring you down because their life is going better than yours. You don't want to bring them down because you don't want to make them, be drawn into your darkness. I mean, there's a million reasons why we kind of just isolate and abandon each other. maybe not even willingly, but it's just a kind of a natural thing because it's so uncomfortable. And it's so like, we just don't want to say the wrong thing, and we don't want to do the wrong, we don't want to be the burden, and all these things. And I noticed, especially with cancer, that was a recurring theme. And I thought to myself, how can we better equip people to deal with the emotional side of that trauma? So that was kind of that. I'm just trying to give the background so that people can understand what the motivating factors were. And that was where this thing kind of took off.
And I appreciate you doing that because, it does fill that backstory does fill those gaps and helps people understand the journey that you then went on. But I want to just pull out, you just said something about that pull that you need to do this. You can't not do this. And I felt that very strongly when my daughter passed. I felt the need to do something about the road speed around that and the need just to do a road campaign to help others. I knew I couldn't do anything for her, but it was about helping others. And it's indeed, this is why I'm doing this podcast now, because the pull is so strong. I can't deny it. And I just have to go down that path, probably like you do. But just before we get into this epic ride that you did, let's just talk about what was that first 24-hour run like for you? Like, did you die?
Yeah, I wanted to. So here's how it went, right? I stopped smoking. I was overweight. I wasn't athletic as an adult, not at all. And I just said that, I got to start somewhere. So I ran 2 minutes and I couldn't even run 2 minutes. So then I said, okay, well, maybe you got to figure out a way to run, 1 mile. And then I did a 5K and then I did a 10K. And then I said, oh, let me try a triathlon. So I did a triathlon. And about 9 months after stopping smoking, I did my first Ironman triathlon. So people in New Zealand, for sure, they know Lake Taupo with Ironman. So I did that, and I've done a bunch since. But then I said, well, maybe I should try to run 50 miles because that's really something. And then once I had run 50 miles a bunch, I said, oh, I got to run 100 miles, right? And I just wanted to keep pushing and keep pushing. But that 100-mile run, I just want to give that background just to let you know that, I was nearly 40 before I tried to run that first 2 minutes and couldn't. So I'm not doing this as a kid. You know what I'm saying?
Yep.
So, but the first 100 miles I ran was 105 miles and it was 25 and a half hours. And I mean to tell you, it was crazy. I was having hallucinations. I was as tired as you could imagine being tired. I had a support crew that was rubbing my legs every couple of miles to work out all the lactic acid. It was nuts. It was completely nuts. But I'm very driven to accomplish something if I start.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know about you, but I'm one of these people. I don't want to start something if I can't do it.
Absolutely.
Right? Even if it's a super, super hard thing, I'm okay starting it as long as I do it. I hate to quit. So that's why I never tried to quit smoking because I was afraid if I failed that I would always fail at quitting smoking. So when I only quit smoking when I was ready to not fail, right? The same thing when I ran 100 miles. I was only ready to do it when I was ready to not fail because I don't like that. I don't want to put in the time and the energy and the emotional, whatever that it takes to do something meaningful, even if it's something stupid like running 100 miles, but I don't want to do that and then fail. So, so it was one step in front of the other. And I was definitely a little bit of Walking Dead.
Wow. And for so many people, that's why they don't do things is because they don't want to fail. And once we get over that fear, it opens a whole new world to us. David, your journey is one of transformation, if you don't mind me calling it that led you to become a top performer at work and then to seek out your own physical, mental, and emotional limits. Are you able to share with us why it's important for us to understand our limits?
Yes. And I'll tell you, thank you for asking that, Helen, because I have come up with what I think is the ultimate driver for me. And I'm not suggesting that this works for other people, but it's ultimate driver for me. And it happened on my first kind of epic endurance event that I ever did. Okay. So I don't know how to explain this in kilometers, but let's just do it in miles.
Miles is fine.
I did an 87-mile rollerblade race. Imagine that. Imagine putting on rollerblades and doing an 87-mile rollerblade race, right? First of all, I had no business being on rollerblades because I was not coordinated. I had no business going 87 miles on rollerblades because who could exercise for 9 hours straight, right? It was the stupidest thing ever. And something visually happened to me that made something click in my mind. And, you just know sometimes something just when you know it. You don't know it before, you're not aware of it, whatever, but you just know what you know when you know it. So I'm about 30 miles or maybe about 2.5 hours into this 9-hour, 87-mile race. And I was at my limit. I had said, that's it. I can't take another step forward. It was hot. I was all these hills. And I remember, Helen, leaning over on my knees, sideways to the hill. So I went to, go roll back down. And I was sweating this heavy sweat that was really white because it was super salty, right? Yeah. And so it's on the black asphalt and it's creating this sweat line. It's just dripping. And I'm watching this thing turn into a line. And I'm like, oh my God, I'm sweating so much that it's making a line. And then it just hit me. Oh, that's a line that says, if you go one side of the line, you know everything about yourself. And if you go the other side of the line, you're going to learn something new. And so if you can figure out a way to take one more step, then you're going to know something new about yourself and find a new limit. And if you could take another one and another one and another one. And I said, oh my God, well, I got to figure out what my limit is, because if I do find my limit, then I can just turn around and walk home. Fun, right? If I always am striving to find out another limit, another thing, what can I do that's more? What can I do that's different, that's better, that's new? Even if it hurts, even if it's uncomfortable, even if I've never been there before, then that's the thing that drives me. And I'm like, well, let me find out something new. And so, on purpose now, that was by accident. I probably did that in my life, but on purpose now, anytime something hard or anything new comes along, I go, yeah, I want to do it because I want to see what my limit is. Because if I don't, I might as well just pack it up and go home. Right? Yeah. I might pack it up and go home. And so it's a way to say that, and maybe it's not like a 24/7 thing. Sometimes you got to sit in the back seat and cry a little bit, but it's more like being in the driver's seat and looking forward instead of looking in the rearview mirror, Yeah. But for me, it's that. So limits, I think, we impose them too easily on ourselves. And I just, to my core, believe that once I know I've reached my limit, I might as well pack it up and go home.
Oh, gosh, that's profound. I really, really love that. And I agree with it too, because in my own way, which my limits are completely different to yours. I'm not an endurance athlete at all, but it's just the limits I push myself to discover information and discover what I can do and what I'm capable of doing. And and then taking that next step. And I love it now because you reach a point where there's no fear there. There might be a bit of hesitation, but it's not fear that cripples and stops you from doing something. It's just like, okay, let's buckle up and get on with this. Yeah. But you just go and do it and you see where it takes you. And often it's places that you never, ever dreamed of. Yeah. So this is kind of like what you did when you rode those incredible distances across the States to visit the people that you feature in your book, Cycle of Lives. And I can't even begin to imagine what hardships you must have endured in this quest. And so why did you decide to ride solo, David, without a support team to do this? And then why do this ride after you've exhaustively interviewed all the people that we're going to feature in your book anyway? So, yeah.
Well, it started
Take us on that journey.
Sure, it will. It actually started off kind of as a gimmick, like in my head, right? So I said to myself, look, I wanted to find 15 people whose stories were very evocative, very inspiring, very hopeful, although many of them involved tragedy and trauma and very difficult things. All A to Z, losing a parent, losing a child, being a caregiver for 40 years and, being desperate to help people, whatever, all these traumatic things, suicide, abandonment, drug abuse, and how these things affected their emotions. And so I was really deep into very, very traumatic, evocative, although also inspiring stories. So they really touched me hard. And I thought that I could learn a lot from them. And if I could write the stories correctly, then the reader could learn a lot from them. And so I kind of came up with this cycle of lives thing. Like a wheel of a cycle has all these different sectors, and that's all the different emotions. That's all the different kinds of cancer. That's all the different ages. And I said, oh, well, okay, if we're going to connect a bunch of stories and make, inspire deeper connection in people, what better way to connect the stories than to go on my bike and connect all the people? I would be the thread that, my story would be the thread that would connect these stories. And so I just kind of said it as a gimmick. And then I said, all right, well, let's do it. So that's why I did it. And then, yes, the amount of self-inflicted, but the amount of pain and difficulty that I incurred along the way was kind of mind-boggling. It was exceptionally hot, very, very windy. Some days were, I had a 17-hour day on the bike. I had many, many days that were 12, 14 hours. I covered 120 miles. So what's that? Like 180K or something a day. I mean, just some like ridiculous amounts of distance. And part of it was because I find that being alone doing endurance athletics is really contemplative, and I wanted to contemplate the stories. I also don't know that I fully had contemplated all the emotions of losing my sister and all the other things that went along with that. So I wanted to contemplate that. And I think it is the first time in my life that I actually purposefully took a long time for myself so I could do those things. Hard, man. Life gets in the way. When do you ever just go away for 6 weeks and just think about stuff? And it made the stories more real in my head, allowed me to connect to the stories a little bit more. And then the benefit to me was it powered me every day, because I'm telling you, Helen, every single day I ran into multiple people that said to me, oh my God, this is such a great idea. I don't know what to say to people. I don't know how to talk to them. This emotional side of it's just so difficult. I don't know how to navigate it. I'd love to see what you learned and whatever. So it just kind of pumped me up each day to keep going, because I knew that this was, if I did it correctly, that it could be impactful for people.
Well, yeah, definitely. What was the hardest part, or what was the hardest part for you?
Yeah.
And then what was your greatest learning?
Oh boy. The hardest part for me was probably the traffic, because it is really traumatic to be on your bike on a busy highway with, big trucks going by and cars going by.
Oh yeah.
It's really traumatic. And again, self-inflicted, but when you got cars going by you and trucks going by you, it's high speeds for hours and hours and hours and hours a day, because I had to be on the main interstates, the main highways. So that was really difficult, because I was living in fear, gripping my handlebars all the time, right? If I heard people hitting those little speed bumps behind me, it meant they were drifting, right? Sometimes there was and I had to navigate, like, how do I get off my bike and back on it quick enough to avoid traffic? And so that part of it was a little dangerous. My wife isn't real happy about some of the stories that I tell her, because it maybe was a tad bit reckless. But the thing I learned the most, there's so many things I learned. Oh my gosh, here's what I learned. I'll tell you the thing I learned the most. Okay. And this is a lot deeper than what it's going to sound like. But so I learned when to rely on people, when not to rely on people. I learned when to take a break, when not to take a break, right? I learned that, your pain is not somebody else's pain and their pain is not yours. Like, just deal with your own life and all. I learned a lot of stuff, right? I think the thing that probably sticks with me more than anything, and it was unbelievably humbling to know the truth behind this following trite statement of everybody's going through something, right? You never know. You never know.
Yeah.
And it's easy to say, but I'm going to tell you, Helen, just like, people that would walk by you in the grocery store would have no idea what you're going through. And people, it's made me at a deeper level. I think I was pretty compassionate before and understanding and observant, but it took that to a whole nother level because people are really going through a lot. And if they're not showing it, it doesn't mean they're not going through anything.
Yeah.
And it really, it probably makes it so I come into as often as I can. Sometimes I get in my own way, but I try to come into most interactions with people with that thought right behind my head. Don't assume you know what they're going through. Don't assume you know anything about them just because of a brief little interaction. People are dealing with all kinds of crap, and it's something that connects us, but it's also something that makes us not connected because we don't know. So I think probably the most major thing I learned.
Oh, that's powerful. And I think just as humans, we're very quick to judge others, very quick to make assumptions of others. And like you say, once we start to peel back the layers, you have no idea whatsoever what people are going through. Because, we're good at putting on those masks and getting on with life and doing what we need to do to survive.
Yeah.
You know what
can I tell you a super quick story?
Sure.
Let me tell you a story about Patricia, because I think her story is really amazing. She's one of the participants in the book. There's 15 different stories, but this is a woman who I thought her story was about the 5 different cancers that she's had over a 35-year period. Okay. In fact, she's been at her oncologist practice longer than the oncologist has been at the practice, and the oncologist is ready to retire, right? I mean, she's been there. She's been through the ringer. They can't cut anything else out. But she's never been sick a day in her life besides cancer, right? And I thought her story was, how do you develop the strength to go through that? But then when I started talking to her, I realized that is not even remotely what her story is. Her story is more about the fact that she survived an incredibly abusive relationship for 4 years with somebody that basically kept her prisoner and would beat the living crap out of her, emotionally, physically, and otherwise, for year after year after year, until she could finally escape by creating a new identity and getting herself out of there. And where her strength comes from is not in that, right? It's not in fighting the cancer. It's not surviving. You know what it comes from? It comes from allowing herself to be loved and to love somebody else. And that love of her husband was the thing that got her over the 4 years of abuse and got her through the 35 years of cancer, is this person at her side. And you think to yourself, wow, not how does somebody have the strength to beat cancer, but how do they have the strength to lean into love and to allow themselves to be loved and to trust their heart and soul to somebody else after going through what she had gone through. And so these are the kind of stories that make me go, oh man, like we could really learn a lot from people.
Oh, I just love that you're talking about emotions. Emotions are dear to my heart. I'm an emotion code and body code certified practitioner and I got drawn to this after I lost my beautiful child. And I think she guided me to it and to help heal my own self. And it just worked so incredibly well. I just have to share it with others. You can't keep these things secret when they are just so, so powerful. And the reason is because as you were speaking there, it was very, it sort of really hit a chord in me because I went through most of my life repressing emotions, trying to be what everybody else wanted me to be, but denying who I was, not loving who I was, but trying to do the best I could. And it's only afterwards that I've discovered that self-love is the most powerful thing in the whole entire world. Oh my gosh, if you want to heal your life, the number one thing I would start with is looking in the mirror and really liking that person who looks back at you and learning to love that person. And it's not easy, it's hard.
Super right? Super hard.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, well, it's taken me a few years to get to this point where I can do that and comfortably. And it's been a life changer for me. And you've spoken about it, about emotions being so pivotal in this whole journey that so many people are not talking about them, they're suppressing them. So tell us what you've learned, David, about grief being a springboard to love and connectivity to those who remain?
That's a really powerful question because everybody's grief is their own. And I have learned you can't minimize somebody's grief and you can't make it more than what it is. And, there's both sides of that coin, right? And I think that what you said before was so powerful that if you can stand up in the mirror, look in the mirror and love yourself back, that's super, super important. And part of that is allowing yourself to be, like you mentioned, but it's also forgiving yourself for making bad decisions. It's forgiving yourself for not taking the most out of every moment or giving the most into every moment or whatever, right? It's a big, huge process. Yeah. Yep. It's crazy. And it's probably something that needs to continue to evolve because you're continuing to take a new step at every minute, every day you're taking a new step. So, but it is something nice. I think the thing that I learned the most about people's grief is that it's usually, and not always, but it's usually their ability to deal with it is in relation to the traumas that they've experienced before. And right. So if you're able to talk to people and you experience grief, then you're a little bit better equipped to talk to people. But if you're somebody that wants to talk to people and everybody that you've opened up to in your past is kind of pulled away from you during difficult times, right, then you might not be able to do that. And so if we can really understand just a little bit more, if we can just get a little deeper connection with people, just ask more open-ended questions to the people that we care about to understand when they're going through something, or they might be going through something, or when we're going through something and are trying to lean into them, that we're able to form that more kind of deep, heart-centered connection. And I think that's, that it's a really hard thing to do, but it's super important is to ask a question. I'll give you a simple example, right?
Yeah, sure.
I say to you, Helen, I know whatever, you're going through something difficult or you've gone through something difficult. And I say to you, hey, are you okay? Do you need anything? You might say, no, I'm fine, right? I don't need anything. I'm fine. And smile and put this brave face on. And meanwhile, you're so happy I didn't ask another question because you might just break down. And I'm so happy that you didn't ask me for help because I wouldn't know how to help anyway, right? Yeah. So we just didn't form that connection because if we went one deeper level, it's hard. It's freaking hard.
It's a social dance, isn't it?
Yes. And so we can't do it with everybody, and not everybody is equipped to be able to guide us along that journey or join us along that journey. But there are people that care, and there are people that want to do it. Right. And so we just have to allow them a safe space to say the wrong thing, allow us a safe space to say the wrong thing. I'll tell you a super quick story. Again, another one, a super quick story. I had this guy that was interviewing me for a podcast. And after we were done, he was like, oh my God, man, you know what? The reason I wanted to talk to you was I was hoping you could help me with my guilt. And I go, whoa, what are you guilty about? And he said, I had a friend that was dying of cancer and he would come over to the house when he was able, or I would go see him. And every time I tried to tiptoe into a serious conversation, he would immediately change the subject to let's turn on the game. Let's grab a pizza. Let's do whatever. He goes and he passed away. And I felt really bad about the fact that I wasn't able to form that connection with him. And I said to him, I go, yeah, except I go, what if you were the only person that he didn't have to get heavy with? What if you were the only person that wouldn't take offense by him saying, I just want to turn the game on, or by him not wanting to go from that safe space to just go, I don't want to freaking deal with this nonsense I'm dealing with? What if the 20 people that he talked to that day all brought him to a place where he was just heavy hearted and you were the one person that gave him a safe space to be lighthearted? And he went, oh yeah, I like that better. Right? And so now it doesn't happen all the time, but now when somebody goes, yeah, I don't really want to talk about it, I might go like, okay, Helen, Do you not want to talk about it because you don't want to talk about it? Do you not want to talk about it because you're really tired about talking about it? Like, why don't you want to talk about it? Is it too difficult? Are you afraid I'm going to say something stupid?
Yeah.
Are you afraid I'm going to run out the door if you say something stupid? I mean, what's the reason? Because whatever it is, I'm telling you, I want to give you a safe place to talk. You don't have to, but just let me know. Am I not asking the right questions for you to feel safe to talk to me?
Gosh, how valuable is that?
Right?
That is such a good story, because it's all about perspectives, isn't it? It's all about how we see something and how we interpret it, and then what we make a decision based off what we've heard. But I also think it's about speaking it out, like you say, because what I've learned is that when you don't speak it out, whether that's speaking it literally out or speaking it out in words on paper or however you choose to do it, you're stuffing it inside. When you stuff it inside, that's when you get really, really unwell. And you carry an awful lot of baggage around that you don't need to be carrying. So I love that. I love that as a friend, as a support person, as that go-to person, ask the next question. Yeah. Tease it out. Powerful.
Yeah, if we knew each other better, right? Instead of asking you, like, how are you doing? Or, oh, I'm so sorry. What happened to you? Because sympathy doesn't do anything, and you can't be sorry for what someone's gone through. I would want to know if I was your friend, like, how are you doing? Like, how are you doing? Like, like, how have you been? How in the world have you been able to move on? Like, how in the world are you so positive? I mean, I want to know. Teach me. And then that gives you a chance to talk about it. And you know that I really want to care. And that's what your journey is bringing you to do anyway. Look at all the people you're enlightening, right? And if you kept it bottled up inside and you didn't deal with it, it would probably turn into something very bad.
Yeah, for sure. But I've got a beautiful angel on my side, so she makes sure it never gets to that point. She gives me a good kick up the butt. Let me tell you.
You have a lot of strength too, because it takes a lot of strength and a lot of courage to expose your real self. It takes a lot of courage and a lot of strength because, right, you were always worrying, just like I was, just like most people listening. We're always wondering what's everybody else thinking.
Yeah.
Right. And so to open it up and to really just lay it out there is really amazing. So I applaud you for that.
Yeah. What I've learned about life is that it's when we make ourselves the most vulnerable and we share those parts, that's when we get the true and the greatest connections, because there's somebody out there. There's always somebody out there that's feeling exactly that same way, and nobody ever talks about it. So we don't get to know. So when somebody does make themselves vulnerable, you can guarantee that you're just opening that door for, people just to say, oh, you too? I feel like that too. And then start sharing their own stories and their own journeys. I feel it's a privilege to be in this place, sharing your story, sharing others' story. Every day I'm grateful that I have the opportunity to do this, and that makes me happy. So you've made me feel really choked up and humbled. Let's have a chat now about, from your experiences of dealing, in such depth with these people and their journeys that you feature in your book. What do people really want when they're going through these experiences? And does it differ where you are on the spectrum, whether you're the person with a terminal illness or whether you're the doctor at the other end of the line providing the care?
Yeah, for sure it is different. There are some similarities, right? There are some similarities. I've kind of found that not everybody, but most people don't want sympathy. They want you to empathize with them, but they don't want your puppy dog eyes. They don't want you to pat them on the back and pat them on the head and say everything's going to be okay, or one day you're going to feel better, or whatever. People just don't want.
Can I interrupt there just for one moment and tease that out a little bit more? Is that because it takes so much energy for that person who's on the other end of that to then sort of make the other person feel okay? Do you think it's around that?
I do think that that's a very big part of it, right? I've learned to stop saying, and I'm sorry. Like, I'm sorry for your loss. That's not, no, I'm not. I'm not the one responsible for it. I shouldn't be sorry for it.
Yeah.
Like, that doesn't do anything but make me feel better. And if you look at me and go, oh, okay, thank you. Like, you're just giving me a free pass, right? So I've learned to not say, I'm sorry, because I'm not responsible for it, right? And that's one of the things that I learned from the stories. Another thing that I learned from the stories is that it does seem to be a very common theme that people are abandoned and or self-isolate. Okay. So, and they don't want to do either in most cases. Okay. I mean, obviously there are times when somebody needs to be self-isolating, when they need to be alone. And sometimes you have to push them away, right? Even if it's not the easy thing to do. So it's not 100%, but there is a very common theme that whether they're self-isolating or being abandoned, that's the last thing that they want. They just don't know how to bridge the gap with their loved ones or friends or family. So those are some of the emotional responses to grief and to trauma and to the trying times that they're going through. But certainly, everybody is at a different point in life. And you know what? If they are aware enough to be dealing with their own feelings, and a lot of people don't want to deal with feelings and emotions, but if they're aware enough to be dealing with their own feelings and emotions, I think those are some of the major, points that, don't sympathize. Don't say you're sorry. Don't abandon me. Don't pretend to feel like to know how I'm feeling. Right. And this is not about me trying to make you feel better.
Yeah.
Those are some
really valid points. Once somebody's gone, it's too late to ask them about all those parts of their life that you kind of knew a little bit about, but didn't really know a lot about. You don't get that second chance to go back and do that. So what I'd love is for people just to communicate more and to document these wonderful stories, because somebody in their 80s or elderly people, they weren't always elderly. And they have some incredible, incredible stories to share.
Yeah. And Helen, that was one other thing that I learned is that every person that I spoke to, even ones that didn't make the final cut on the book, but every single person I spoke to, I eventually talked to them for a long time because they had the most unbelievably epic, interesting, dramatic, inspiring, evocative stories. But every single person, Helen, when I started talking to him, said, oh, my life's not that interesting. I don't know why anybody would want to know what's going on because my life's not an issue. So what I learned is that people are just living their life. Like they don't think they're interesting, right? Most people don't think that they're anybody. But once you uncover some stories and once you realize that there is a lot of knowledge and we can learn from these stories, that is really a fascinating part of like just being present and just coming just a little bit deeper. I'll tell you one last super quick story about kind of that culminates. It's actually the last story I tell in the book, right? Yep. But about what I really learned. Okay. Oh. I'm only saying this because a lot of people won't want to end up reading the book because, reading books is tough. But I was at the very end of my bicycle ride. I was 45 days. I was on day 45 of 45 days. Okay. Yep. And somebody had asked me at dinner the night before, what I had learned. And I couldn't come up with the number one thing that I had learned. I couldn't come up with it. I tried to stand in front of the mirror and I couldn't come up with it. And I just said, well, maybe I'll figure it out down the road. But I did figure it out down the road about 10 miles from my finish line at Central Park in New York. So what happened was I roll up on my bike to these two girls that are talking. Okay. And because I didn't know the directions of once I go over the bridge, which way do I go to get to the place where I need to get to at Central Park to meet all the people that were there at the finish line. So I had to ask somebody for directions. I'm on a bike. I'll ask a couple of cyclists. So they stopped talking and I wheel up to the one that was remaining and I started asking her, oh, hey, how do I get to so-and-so? And she sees this patch on my arm because I was wearing a jersey with all these logos and people's names and that kind of stuff. And she goes, oh, you doing a ride for cancer? And I go, yeah, I am. And she goes, how long? And I go, oddly enough, I have 10 miles left of 4,700 miles. And she's like, what? She goes, how in the world? And I said, yeah. And she goes, oh my gosh, you know why I cycle? And I go, no. And she goes, because it was the last thing I did with my dad. My dad was diagnosed with stage 4 cancer. It took him about 4 years to die. But anytime that he was filling up for it, we would go on these epic bike rides and we would just talk and this and that. And I remember at that moment, I said to myself, the previous David would have said, oh my gosh, I'm sorry to hear that, right, about your dad. Anyway, thanks and have a good day. And I would try to get out of there so I could get to where I was going. But I knew after all that I had gone through that the next question was the important one. And I said, oh my God, what was he like?
Yeah, tell me about your dad. That's what I was just thinking. Yeah.
Yeah. She was like, oh my God, he was the greatest guy. And he was so nice. He was a great dad. And this and that and blah, 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 blah. She goes, and he had a sense of humor that was never ending. And I go, oh my God, what do you mean? And she goes, oh, well, let me tell you a story. And she goes, when we would go on a bike ride, anytime he was feeling good, he would wear this bike ride that has ice cream cones all over it. And all of his friends would make fun of him because of his ice cream cone jersey. She goes, and he decided that as a joke to make his friends laugh at his funeral, he wanted to be buried in his ice cream cone jersey. She goes, so we put the ice cream cone jersey on him and everybody got a big laugh at it. We buried him and that was that. And I said to myself, I went, wow, what a story. And I told her, I said, thank you for sharing that story with me. And then she said, okay, no worries. And we're gone. And we're right now. I will never run into this woman ever again. Right. Never. Yeah. I'll never run into her ever again. Well, our paths will never cross and they just can't. But here I am. I'm so touched by the fact that this girl shared this story with me. And it's such a deep, meaningful story. I will never, ever forget the ice cream cone jersey story and how this girl lit up because somebody didn't go, oh, I'm sorry to hear that, and then drive away. They got her a moment to be able to tell a story to a stranger and relive just for 1 second the great emotion she had over her dad. And I felt, what a gift, man, that these people gave me the knowledge and the awareness to ask a question, rather than to say, oh, I'm sorry, and pat him on the head and then drive away. Right. So that was the thing that I learned. And that is, kind of a culmination of all we've been talking about. And also that people have stories and those stories are interesting and we can learn from them.
Gosh, that is gold.
Isn't that gold?
That is gold.
Yeah.
Seriously, I'm going to make that my thing going forward. Don't leave it at that, hi, how are you? See you later. Bye.
Right.
Let's ask the next question. Let's find out about people.
Yeah.
Wow. I'm touched. We're doing that right throughout the whole chat. You just flipping me over. So what was your intention behind covering such a broad range of people within your book? Because that's what I love about it. I love that you're not just dealing with an isolated story or person, that you've actually gone across a whole spectrum. Why did you decide to do that? And how did you choose the people?
So I chose to do it that way because I find it hard to relate to people that I can't relate to, that are like, right. Like, imagine the guy that's doing drugs. He's 30 years old. He's living on his mom's couch and has no ambition and doesn't want to get anything out of life. I have nothing in common with that person. I can't learn from them. Same thing with the guy or the gal, like the Oprah Winfrey of the world or the Branson or whoever. I can't identify with them. So I'm not moved by one person's story unless I can really feel for them and really identify with them. And if you're trying to tackle this subject as ridiculous as the trauma of cancer and the emotions that are involved, I feel like one person's story just doesn't teach anybody anything except for maybe in that little sliver. And one of the things I love about like what you do is you don't talk about the same thing 80 different ways. You interact, you interconnect how the 80 all interconnect to each other. And it's like endless topics and endless facets and endless stories to tell that all kind of shine a different light on not the same thing, it's on the whole thing. And so I figured that was the way I could do the book, for a reader like me to be able to take something from it. Right. I needed to bring it that way. how I found the people were, one was a friend. The other 14 that made it into the book were people that I met along the way. I cold called hospitals. I cold called cancer centers and said, hey, who do you know? You got anybody that has an interesting story? I asked friends if they knew anybody that had an interesting story to please tell me so that I could find out if it would fit kind of that different perspective on the whole issue. And so, yeah, I just, like I said, 14 out of 15 were strangers, and they just, that made the book. And they all just had these, unbelievably moving and traumatic and inspiring stories that, that I felt like it would accomplish what I was trying to accomplish.
I'm so grateful that you've done that. I've bought your book. I bought your book and I started reading it, and it was late at night, and I was already going on that journey with you and getting fascinated by these people. And I thought, I have to put this down because I know what's going to happen. Because
oh my God, it's so funny.
Yeah, it's incredible. You just see so many different things as you read along, and things that you don't even think about. And so I'm so excited to finish it. I'm just regretting now that I didn't buy it weeks ago and have it read by the time I got to interview you. Sorry, David. I love to do that too with the people I interview. I love to get their books and understand another part of them that perhaps I didn't when I was talking to them. So yeah. So I've got that in store for me, and I'm excited.
I'm excited for you as well, and thank you. That's really sweet. Will you do me a favor? I want you to, when you get past the story of where I talk about June as a guardian angel, okay, when you get past that story, I want you to send me a little note because I want to clue you into something. I can't tell you how to, but I want to clue you into something that will be
awesome.
Very personal to you.
Oh, that is cool. I'm excited.
Yeah.
Okay. So, oh my gosh. Do you know, I've got loads more questions, and we could just keep going on and on and on because this has just been such a great interview. I feel like you've shared so many pearls of wisdom with us about what life can teach us. So I've got a few more questions just to finish up. Yeah. And who knows what's down the line, because, when I get people I just want to keep talking to, chances are I might have you back again. But right now, I want to find out what the best thing is that's happened to you either today or this past week.
Well, there's no question the best thing of my day is talking to you. There's absolutely no question. No, I'm serious. My wife's on a business trip. I'm just doing stuff around the house. We're getting ready to go see a concert in another state. So I got to pack. I got all this stuff going on today. I'm not interacting with a lot of people. I woke up with a tiny little bit of a cold. I got nothing like a spectacular. I did a podcast earlier today. I did some work. I did some writing. I did all this. But definitely, I would say the best part of my day is talking. And I'm not saying that. I mean it.
Me too. I've been out and about as well. But definitely, I'm just loving this. Okay. What is your proudest moment in your life to date?
Ooh, wow. The proudest moment in my life. Okay. I tell you super quick. Can it be about...
yeah. This is your story. You tell it.
So I got a lot of proud moments, but I have one moment that sticks. I don't know if it's pride though. I'm going to tell the story, but I don't know if it filled me with pride or joy or just love or whatever. But let's call it pride for now. Right?
Okay.
So we were doing a 24-hour Relay for Life. Basically, it's an event that American Cancer Society puts on, right? And I had promised my sister that I would run for the whole 24 hours because she was promising to show up for the whole 24 hours to watch the team cheer her on. She died 2 days before, and so she wasn't able to be there. But me and my kids were there, and obviously this big team of her friends and family and, tons of other people were there. Anyway, so at nighttime, there is the remembrance lap. And all the lights go down and people light candles on bags that they've written notes on. And it's very, very moving. But it's also symbolic that why, when it comes to the emotional side of it, do the lights go down And do we walk quietly, right? Why aren't we doing it in the light and talking? But that's another story. So my kids are 9. Like I said, they're twins, boy and a girl. And we were walking, and they were walking a little bit ahead of me. And all of a sudden, there's this woman standing or kneeling on the ground, and she's patting out these 2 bags that had caught fire. Okay. And I walk up, and David, my son, has his hand on her shoulder, and my daughter is standing there, and they're saying, everything's going to be okay. And she looked up and she said, oh, I'm so sorry to be so emotional. She goes, I lost both parents to cancer this year. She goes, and I wrote this beautiful letter. I'm getting a little emotional. Sorry. She goes, I wrote this beautiful letter on this bag, to each parent. And now it's burned up. They're never going to know what I wrote, and my son goes, they'll know. Don't worry about it. And he looked at me and he said, hey, do you mind if we walk with her? So I stood back. They each took one hand and they walked with her. They didn't talk. They didn't do whatever. They just held her hand and walked around the track with her. And I went, wow. And compassionate, wonderful kids, and it was just it's a moment that, I'm hopeful will never leave me, but that was a pretty proud moment.
Wow. That is not only a proud moment, a powerful moment, when your kids can show such compassion to a complete stranger, that they are definitely on the right track. And
you know what I would have done? I mean, I wasn't anywhere aware about what the heck to do. I probably would have oh my gosh, what's she going through, and hurried up and walked past, right? Because I don't want to get in her space, and I don't know what to say. I'm probably going to say something stupid. But meanwhile, all they did was just stand there and talk to her. And I was just wow, that's just so beautiful. It's so powerful,
I'm going to share something with you that, I don't normally talk about, but, my daughter was a gift to me in my life to show me unconditional love. And she was just this bright, shining light of hope and happiness and sassiness. And she used to question me and say, hold on a minute here. You can't be a hypocrite, And I think back, and that's what makes me so, so proud to be her mom. The fact that I was gifted this beautiful soul for 18 years. What a ride it was. And every day I am grateful for that. Yeah. Would I have liked a lifetime? Probably, but would I learned what I have learned since? Gosh, there's no price I can put on that. So it's kind of difficult to weigh up, but every day I'm grateful. So,
yes, when we talked earlier, Helen, we talked about that, knowing what your limits are, right? Every breath that you take is a new limit for you, because you're getting to know something more about yourself and about your journey and about your life. And I'm with you, man. There's no wrapping your brain around why something like that could happen. And there's less wrapping your brain around why it could happen to you. But now you either have to pack it up and go home, or you got to take the next step forward. And thankfully you're taking the steps forward. You're teaching people a lot.
Thank you. Right. Okay. What do you do when you have a moment that's turning to absolute custard, like that, and you need to pivot yourself out of it? What's your go-to?
Geez, that's easy, but it's a lot. I love to cook, so I'll go cook something. I love to do mosaic tile work, so I'll go just do a mosaic tile. I solve a lot of problems running and biking, so I'll go do something like that. So I usually, if I sit and stew, it's not going to get better. I got to go put something fresh into my brain, and then I can work it out.
Beautiful. I saw your pizza oven.
Oh my goodness.
Incredible mosaic work. It looks awesome.
It was 100 hours of it, of tiling. That was crazy. But yeah, I do all kinds of mosaic tile work as a kind of I like putting puzzles together. So, even in your brain, puzzles great. Yeah. Thank you for taking a look at that. How cool is that, right?
Oh, I know. It's awesome. I loved it. Absolutely loved it. So 3 takeaways or just whatever takeaways would you like to leave with our listeners?
One is, let's go on order of importance. One is
Okay.
Just ask more questions, and not yes or no questions. Ask some open-ended questions, right? I know that that's what you want from other people, even if you can't, answer them correctly, right? That's what you want, right? And so I'd say ask more open-ended questions. 2, what you said earlier, I thought was so poignant about loving yourself. I would say really work on that. For me, it came in the form of forgiving myself for making so many mistakes and not being at a better place in my life or knowing things earlier than when I knew them. I had to work on that a lot, just to say, just forgive yourself. It's all good. You can keep trying. You can keep doing better. And third, I would say is a very distant third, but it's a good thing. If you do end up buying the book, all the proceeds go to cancer. So 100%,
I love that.
100% of it go to the charities that are listed in the book. They're listed on the website. There's not a lot of money in books. I mean, there's no money in podcasts. There's very little money in books, but still 100% of it is going to support organizations. So yes, I know that's a selfless plug, but whatever.
Yeah, no, plug away a bit more. How can anybody reach you if they want to know more about what you're doing, David?
Well, you can connect with me on whatever social media, Instagram, Facebook, whatever. It's not always the devil all the time, that social media stuff. It's kind of fun.
Yeah.
Sometimes. Certainly you can buy the book. The audio book is coming out literally any day. So I'm very, very excited by that.
Great.
I'm really, really excited because 15 different actors played each of them. So
awesome.
I do the narrative of the bike ride and some of the stories, but each one of those stories that I'm not a part of, a different actor did it. So I'm really excited for the audiobook to come out so they can go on wherever books are sold, stores and online resellers or wherever. And if you like the book, or if you don't like it and you want to write a review. If you think that it's a good book, then give it to a cancer center or give it to a hospital or give it to a friend, because it could probably help them too.
Yeah, love that. Love that, David. What an absolute privilege to be speaking to you today, hearing your fabulous story, which was so much more than what I ever anticipated or expected. And yeah, I'm just very, very grateful for your time and for your stories. Thank you.
Thank you. And I'm grateful for you too. You do a really good job. You're doing a great thing. I don't know you, but I'm very proud of you. It's very awesome.
Thank you. Hey, thanks for listening. If you enjoyed this episode today, be sure to share it with others. Hit the subscribe or like button so you can be notified of each weekly episode. Also, let me know how I'm doing, especially if there's more you'd like to know that perhaps we didn't get time to touch on today or in past episodes. And if you're after resources to help you out on this journey or more about the energy healing work I do, hit the Healing to Be You link. That's the word healing, 2, letter B, letter U.com. So until next time, be kind to you and thank you for joining us on the beautiful side of grief.